This absurd true story took place in Arizona, where a couple of men were victims of prejudice within their own condominium because of a Karen. From day one, she kept an eye on the new residents, but when she discovered that they were a couple of men, she decided that they didn't belong there.
If there's one thing I've learned since moving into this condo in Arizona, it's that there's always one neighbor who thinks she owns the place. The one who pretends she's looking after the neighborhood, but is really just looking after other people's lives. In my case, that neighbor was Morgana, or rather, Karen. She had lived there for over 10 years and was absolutely certain that the condominium was hers. She knew everything: who left, who arrived, who parked wrong, and above all, who shouldn't be there. And when my husband and I moved in next door to her, well, that's when she went on high alert. On the first day, I thought it was just a coincidence. Every time we went out to unload something from the car, there she was pretending to water the plants. I'd give her a polite smile, and she'd return it with a look like she was mentally writing down every detail about us. But then the questions started. First, the doorman.
Are they brothers or something else?
Then to the neighbor in front.
Nothing against it, but did they really buy this house?
And then, finally, she sent a message to the condominium messaging group.
Guys, does anyone know who the new neighbors are?
First, there were the subtle complaints. They get a lot of people. They were just friends helping with the move. Their car is on the street a lot, because the garage was still full of boxes. But, funny enough, that was only a problem when it was us. But the real problem started when she overheard us talking in the market. My husband suggested, shall we organize a barbecue this weekend to meet the neighbors? The intention was good, right? To get to know the people, to create a friendly atmosphere. But Karen wasn't going to let that happen. After all, in her mind, the good neighborhood needed to be protected. And that's when she went from annoying gossip to a real problem. If there was one thing Karen wouldn't allow, it was two married men promoting an event in her condominium. Because yes, in her mind, it was her condo. The problem started 2 days after we decided to have the barbecue. No big deal, just a small event to get to know the neighbors and create a friendlier atmosphere. Something completely normal. But for Karen, it was a threat. The woman activated her unofficial trustee mode. She began to act as if it were her divine mission to ensure that the barbecue did not happen. First, she sent a message in the condominium group.
Everyone, just a reminder that we have rules about noisy events. Let's keep the neighborhood peaceful, okay?
Sure, because a welcome barbecue was a noisy event. But you know what wasn't noisy? Her daughter's parties that filled the street with drunken teenagers every Friday. But that was just the beginning. The next day I found out that she had gone to the condominium management.
Are you sure these new residents have gone through all the approvals? I think we should review the rules for private events.
The concierge told me later. She really thought she was going to create a code of conduct out of thin air just to stop us from having a simple barbecue. When that failed, she resorted to psychological terrorism. She would pass by our house 50 times a day, always with her cell phone in her hand, pretending to be on an important call. You could see that she was listening to every detail of our organization. She wanted to know everything. And then the tickets began. Yes, tickets. In the first one, she put in our mailbox. Large events create discomfort for the neighborhood. Consider reducing the number of guests. In the second, she was more direct. Respect the families around you. This is a traditional condominium. What kind of fifth-rate threat was that? That's when I decided this barbecue was now a mission. And to make sure it was going to be an unforgettable event, I made a decision that drove Karen crazy. I invited the landlord. If Karen was already freaking out before, now she was going to completely lose control. Because yes, after the ridiculous tickets and attempts at intimidation, I decided to take the barbecue to the next level. First, I increased the guest list. The event, which was initially only for a few people, was now turning into a festival. I invited all the neighbors, including those Karen pretended didn't exist. I even called the landlord, because if Karen tried any last-minute scams, he'd be there to nip it in the bud. And the icing on the cake, I hired a DJ. Yes, my friends. Now it was personal. When the big day arrived, Karen was on the balcony before the sun had even risen. She stood there, arms crossed, watching every detail of the preparations. Her gaze followed every chair being positioned, every ornament being hung, every crate of beer being unloaded. You could see the pure hatred emanating from that woman. When the clock struck 4 p.m. and the guests began to arrive, she sprang into action. The first attempt at an attack came via the condominium group.
Guys, does anyone know if this event has been authorized? This looks like a public order disturbance.
The answer came within minutes, and it was the best possible one. Yes, the event is within the rules. The liquidator is even here. Would you like to come and talk to him? She didn't answer me and even disappeared from her balcony. Shortly afterwards, a police car appeared in the street. Yes, she called the police about a barbecue. The officers got out of the car looking bored. You could tell they were used to useless complaints. They talked to the landlord for a few minutes and went straight to Karen, who was waiting outside the house with her arms folded and a victorious smile on her face. But as soon as they heard that there had been no infraction, the police gave an answer that made Karen swallow. If you keep making false reports, you could be fined. She went white. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. She couldn't say a word. I raised my beer and toasted. The humiliation she suffered from the police would have been enough for any normal person to drop the ball. But do you know Karens very well? They don't know when to stop. After the police told her that the next false report could result in a fine, she sat still for a few seconds, processing what had just happened. But it didn't take long for her to change tactics. If she couldn't stop the barbecue with the police, then she was going to end it another way. Pretending that nothing had happened, she picked up her cell phone and started typing as if her life depended on it. And then, in less than 5 minutes, the condominium group started to boil over.
The neighborhood is in chaos. The kids can't even play properly with this loud music. We're losing control of our neighborhood. Where is this going? Do we really want this kind of event happening here?
She was trying to gather support, but no one bought the idea. The answer came quickly. Stop being annoying. The party is within the rules. That's enough. And that answer didn't come from just anyone. It came from the liquidator himself. That would have been enough for anyone to understand that they had lost. But Karen decided to try one last card. She went downstairs and came to our door. I was still laughing at the situation when I saw her marching towards the landlord with the expression of someone about to say the last word.
You have to do something. This isn't a neighborhood for that kind of thing.
The manager crossed his arms and looked at her unhurriedly. That kind of thing? She felt uncomfortable right away. She tried to explain herself, but it was too late.
Well, you know, events like that, people like that.
The atmosphere became like that, sinister. My husband was already clenching his hands in anger and indignation. This time, it wasn't just the liquidator who stopped. Anyone nearby heard perfectly what she said, and if, until that moment, she still had a chance of getting out of this without sinking completely. It was at that moment that she dug her own grave. The liquidator took a deep breath and, in a very calm tone of voice, said, "Listen, I was already talking to some members of the board about your excessive complaints, but now that you've made it clear that this is a personal problem, I think it's time we made a decision." She paled.
What decision?
He took out his cell phone and showed her the dozens of complaints she had already made against various residents. People she didn't consider suitable for the condominium. "We'll discuss your staying here." The woman slammed on the brakes. Now she knew she had overstepped the mark. And if she thought things couldn't get any worse, well, she was very wrong. If there's one thing Karens can't stand, it's losing. And now, not only had she lost, but she was about to suffer real consequences. The landlord had once again made it clear that her stay in the condominium was hanging by a thread. He had all the proof: messages, false reports, absurd complaints, and now, a prejudiced comment made in front of everyone. But instead of accepting her mistake and shutting up, the crazy woman exploded. First, she started shouting.
This is absurd. This place is becoming a mess. This condominium has always been a family environment, and now they're allowing anything here.
The anything was about me and my husband. She wasn't ashamed to hide it. The landlord crossed his arms, keeping his cool, but the neighbors were no longer so patient. Some began to argue back. "Are you listening to yourself? Have you lost your sanity? Do you think you can decide who lives here? You're the only person bringing trouble to this condominium." But she didn't want to hear it. She just wanted to vent her anger. That's when she started breaking things. First, she grabbed one of the chairs from the common area and threw it on the floor, shouting profanities. The noise made even those inside the party leave to see what was going on. Then she went over to one of the decorations we had put up for the barbecue and tore it up, pulling at the decorations as if she were possessed. The landlord took a step forward. "That's enough. You're completely out of control." But she wasn't even listening anymore. Her eyes were filled with hatred.
I'm not going to live in a place where this kind of thing is accepted. I'd rather move out than share space with these disgusting people.
It was at that moment that someone finally did what should have been done a long time ago. One of the neighbors called the police. Crazy Karen was still breaking things when the sirens went off in the background, and for the first time, she seemed to realize that she had crossed the line. But now, it was too late. The neighbors moved away quickly as 2 cars appeared in the street with sirens flashing. 4 policemen got out of their cars and went straight to the landlord, already looking at the destruction Karen had caused. Broken bottles, chairs on the floor, torn decorations. The woman looked like she'd just come out of a collective outburst. But Karen, she wasn't finished yet. She was pacing back and forth, snorting, shaking, her face completely red, like a bull about to charge. Her eyes were no longer logical, just pure hatred. One of the policemen stepped forward, calm, professional, as if he was used to this type of person. "Ma'am, we need you to calm down and come with us to clarify this situation." The sentence was simple, but for Karen, it was as if he had declared war.
This is absurd. I'm the victim here. It's them who should be arrested.
She shouted, pointing at me and my husband, as if we were in the middle of a court hearing. The policeman kept his tone calm. "Let's talk in the car. Don't make it harder for yourself." But if there's one thing these Karen stalls never do in life, it's make it easy. Before the cops could even get close, she exploded.
Don't touch me. I have rights. I pay taxes.
And then she attacked. She turned with supernatural force and pushed one of the policemen so hard that he almost fell to the ground. The other tried to hold her down, but she started thrashing about, punching the air, kicking and screaming as if she was being taken to some kind of dungeon. The neighbors didn't know whether to laugh or run. "Jesus Christ, that woman is possessed," someone muttered next door. "Film, film," another whispered, his cell phone ready. Policeman who had been pushed wasted no time. He pulled out his taser, and zap! Karen fell to the ground like a tree felled by a hurricane. The neighbors held their breath. The silence was so great that you could hear a cricket chirping in the background. For a few seconds, she stood trembling in the yard, her eyes wide, completely still. Then she began to sob, not understanding what had just happened.
I'm a good woman. You'll regret this.
She whimpered as the police handcuffed her like a sack of rotten potatoes. The neighbors watched the scene, some recording everything, others just shocked. The queen of the condominium had fallen from her throne in the worst possible way. When they finally got her into the car, the police turned to us. "Do you want to file a complaint against her?" And guess what? We said yes. Suit for defamation, harassment, and destruction of property. The condominium also filed a complaint, claiming that she was compromising the security of the place. But the scariest thing came later. Some neighbors began to comment that, before she was arrested, Karen had been saying in a low voice that she would do anything to get us out of there. Apparently, she had darker plans. It was said that she whispered about taking care of them, and that certain people wouldn't last long in that neighborhood. When her children found out, they were desperate. A week after the mess, a moving truck pulled up in front of her house. Her children spent the day carrying boxes, avoiding eye contact with anyone. They knew their mother had gone too far. And then the spoiled old woman disappeared. They say she went to live with a distant relative, but the truth, nobody bothered to ask. Now finally the condominium is free and clear, and the lawsuits are continuing because I'm going to make her pay for everything she's done to me and my husband.
Hey, don't forget that we have plenty of real stories from followers who recount the creepiest moments with the Karens. Take a look at our card and see you in the next video.